Hey, back with a review of The Other Side of the Wind, a 2018 film directed by, co-produced, co-written, co-edited by Orson Welles. This is a part of my one movie a week series for myself in 2021, where I just kind of pick out a movie that I want to watch, um, probably a little bit more on the artsy fartsy side of life, just to kind of balance out that kind of steady diet of junk food that a lot of very entertaining and very well crafted, but sometimes just much more commercially minded film that I usually imbibe, and yeah, trying to get back into that thing of filmmaking as an art form. And The Other Side of the Wind by Orson Welles has been one of these movies that I've been meaning to get to for the longest of times. I've had a Netflix subscription for a long time, and it's just always been one of the ones like, oh, I should get to that. Oh, I should get to that, and I've never have. So to kind of more kick this off, I started off with 13th by Ava DuVernay, and number two is The Other Side of the Wind by Orson Welles. This is a movie that was conceived of in the 60s. I think he started filming it in the 70s, um, kind of 1970 to 19, I think it's 76, because Orson Welles always had trouble with finances, with political stuff. This one was, I think, kind of ended up in the hands of the Iranian regime after the revolution, in they that they kind of froze it being to be able to be continued on with. Um, so it stars John Huston, Peter Bogdanovich, Bob Random, um, something Strasbourg, Odar Koja. Ooh, I'm butchering those names, and is all about the last night almost in the life of a kind of a macho, arty film director who's at the end of a day of production, which seems to be kind of semi nudie part of the film. Lots of breasts. This is the first thing that he's just seems to be taking. His last thing of filming is kind of a voyeuristic looking in at a steam bath scene of women giggling, and perhaps one of them has a dildo and it's a strap on. It's just like, okay, that's the last scene of things. And now he's going off to the ranch or wherever to have this big party where there's all this media, all this uh, experimental filmmakers, documentarians, um, um, news reporters, critics, all kind of swirling around, and they're all taking pictures, which is what kind of gives the film its texture, because it's a faux kind of documentary where they piece together with multiple edits, all these various shots in black and white, in color, all very kind of choppily put together, which, knowing this production and a lot of other Orson Welles productions, he's sort of ended up taking as a later style for himself, basically because he was always piecing stuff together. I think John Huston comes to the project later in the thing, so that they filmed a lot of the one side of the dialogue first, and then when John Huston joined the production, they filmed his side of the scene, so you get a lot of like one shotters of the one person talking, and then click to another shot of the other person talking. Um, and we also get the movie within the movie, which is The Other Side of the Wind. This old film director's, what's going to be his last unfinished product, which is very much kind of very art European thing. It's funny. He's a very macho American filmmaker. You would expect something of kind of meat and potatoes, kind of old Hollywood kind of. John Ford or something like that. But no, it's this very kind of arty, really striking kind of visuals in that of just vivid colors and just amazing composition in that movie within the movie. The other stuff is very much kind of documentary, kind of shaky cam and oddly framed and other film, especially at the beginning when the various actors are getting interviewed. You've got other cameras sticking in their face or boom mics. It's all very kind of like this is the backstage stuff. And uh, there's this thing of the star of the film seems to have gone missing, has taken off. Indeed, we get in the middle of the picture, you see him. Uh, it's Houston's character uh, um, seems like humiliating the guy on camera, and him just storming off, and that's like the last we see of him. And this guy is played by, as I said, is it Bob Random, who is actually is born in Chilliwack in British Columbia, and now as I guess he's in his 70s and lives up the island here in Qualicum Beach, which is just like an odd little random fact, which I found out as I was going along. But he's like just really kind of a very kind of a soulful, semi-blank presence, which obviously the director seems to be very bewitched with. It's interesting. It's very much about how he's a very macho guy, and there's a lot of like using gay epithets, the F word, a lot, but is obviously somebody who's got his own. The director has his own kind of sexuality of maybe discomfort with women and obsession with men. Um, there's, if not homosexual feel to it, it's definitely homoerotic. There's definitely, you can see Wells um, kind of pulling that apart, as well as just pulling apart his own kind of persona as kind of a hapless director whose productions are often getting um, shut down for money reasons and alienating lots of the people around him. Um, yeah, and it ending in a very kind of semi sun beginning and ending. At the beginning of the movie starts off with he's dead, and there's been a car crash, and we get a still of the car, a car that he wanted to give to his star John Daly when he finished the film, is present to him, which is like a very kind of romantic thing in itself, of like giving it's like giving your lover a present. But instead, the movie star, the star of the film, storms off, and he drives off a bridge and dies. And whether it's a suicide or an accident, we don't know. I mean, he's definitely a heavy drinker. He's someone who's really dissipated, someone who seems to be kind of really out of it, and then just viperishly back in. And he and Houston and Bogdanovich are really kind of like, you really do get this kind of this male macho, um, full of themselves, self-importance. It's hard not to kind of semi despise them as you're watching them, be grossed out by them. And indeed, like, the film that this guy's making, you know, I have to give it to Wells, that, will have these sex scenes, but we'll also have Houston sitting on the side in black and white, staring at them, and then giving them direction. And it's kind of gross, purient, purient direction as well, of things of like, it's like, this is what the actors is like in their ears while they're trying to perform their scenes. There's also the thing of that the co-lead with Daly is supposed to be a native woman who's referred to as like Pocahontas throughout the thing, or and stuff like that. Not played by a Native American. It's played by Kojar Uja, whatever her name is, who is Croatian actually. Um, so I think it's probably brown face there, um, red face, I guess, more accurate. So, and which is interesting because we also just have at a certain point the director character kind of getting up and talking about how, like, how everyone here, all the natives here were exterminated. And you know, he says disappeared, but he says it in such a sarcastic manner that you know, yeah, disappeared in that way that conquered peoples get disappeared. Um, so yeah, it was a strangely really involving picture. Being, you know, it definitely is that whole thing of there, you know, like a Citizen Kane, where there's like that central figure, or the, I even think about like the third man, which isn't an Orson Welles thing, but that central figure who's kind of dark, and you're just kind of wondering about. Indeed, the start of the picture, you see the back of his head, you see him say a couple of words, but then it's like he's not saying a lot for a good hunk of the picture. You only get deep into it. You get everyone around him commenting on him, which really reminds me of something like Citizen Kane. Um, but now he's turning it from a magnet, a newspaper magnet, turning it back on to a director, uh, which is, yeah, which you know, you can't help but see this is also his kind of poison, uh, his bitter, ruleful look at his himself, as well as maybe a certain kind of director in Hollywood. Um, but just, yeah, and also the people around him, like a kind of a washed up old actor who's now kind of doing kind of all his buddy stuff. There's a really dark character who's the fixer, who is like he's you know, he could be working for the mafia, or as it looks like at the end of the movie, he could be just going to work for Paramount at the end of the thing. He's that kind of you know, he does all the dirty work for the director. Um, yeah, yeah. So that is my review, my reflections, my response to The Other Side of the Wind by Orson Welles. It's like, wow, wow. What a lovely treat to have. Almost, you know, I think they said like, you know, 40 years, 40 years in the making. I think if you went back to the 60s, it would be like, you know, 60 years of just, you know, this thing kicking around, and finally out in a weird Frankensteinian kind of patchwork way. But I think a lot of Orson Welles kind of later pictures did have that feel to them, and he kind of he adapted his method to his circumstances, and in kind of really interesting ways. Um, you know, there is definitely a sense of, you know, here's an older film director, but he's still really trying to kind of like, you know, be doing interesting, cutting edge things. Like this is a art film that he is making at the end of his life. It's not a kind of a staid, you know, stately kind of thing, harking back to his olden days, even though in some ways it does harken back to something like Citizen Kane. All right, yeah, that's probably enough babbling on that. More videos later.